Now college football season is here on -3, once and for all, fresh off his Gators, big upset of the Vols. What else is new? And on a personal note, 0-8 against the spread last week. Oh, it's great stuff. He is perhaps, at least in the running for the king of college football. He's all over the place. On 3, he's our old pal, Andy Staples. How are you, fella?
I'm good. So I do want to point out on the 0-8, we put out a graphic with 8 of my picks from my pick show last week. We made 13 picks. So I told our social media guru, I said, just pick the 8 you feel like work the best. And so those are the 80 pick. I went 0-8 on those. I actually went 4-1 on the other ones. So I want to thank you, Penn State. I want to thank you, Wisconsin, for not making me look like a complete moron. But it is much funnier that the graphic showed 0-8 instead of 4-9, because 4-9 people can understand. 0-8, like, it's really hard to go 0-8.
Boy, oh boy, your social guru over there, really, that's remarkable that he could pick the ones that we're all going to lose for you. And by the way, my college football picks have stunk too, so we park our cars in the same garage there. You know, I'm sure this is one of your favorite subjects, but at what point are we going to pull off the Band-Aid on behalf of the Volunteers and stop calling it a rivalry? First of all, it's in the running for the ugliest uniform matchup among perennial foes, the clashing oranges.
You don't like
and all
clashing
that.
shades of orange?
I don't care for that. And I also don't care for, as a man of justice, calling that a rivalry when 25 of the last 31 have been won by one side. How say you?
So it's interesting because if the SEC stays at 8 conference games, it will not be an annual game anymore. It will be a twice every 4 years game. I don't think that's going to happen long term. I think ultimately the SEC will go to 9 games, because if they don't play 9 conference games, they will not be having Texas and Texas A&M play every year, which seems kind of stupid. So I think eventually they'll go to that. The question is, will Tennessee want to be part of playing Florida every year? As you said, it's starting to feel like a curse. They haven't won in Gainesville since 2003. And what's interesting about this particular matchup, this one didn't feel like one of those curse games. I've seen those curse games where Tennessee came in, was clearly better, played like crap, and lost. This was a case where Florida just beat Tennessee. Like, that was a straight up beating, and big win for Billy Napier, because Gainesville was a nervous town last week. It was maybe people are out on this guy. Maybe they don't believe, but he won a game exactly the way he promised his team would play when he got it going. And so I think that gives you the glimmer of hope. Now they'll bail on him if they lose to Kentucky in 2 weeks, but that's just the SEC for you.
Well, I do want to dig in on the state of the SEC and some of the other conferences, but a couple of things that we have to hit on just again. College football, delightful. I'm sure you heard about what happened in Boulder on Saturday night. Colorado State, the big lead, the Buffs rally, and then they pull. And people are belly aching on social media and beyond about storming the field. Where do you come down on this? I don't want to steer you. I don't want to assert that you don't belong on Mount Pius if in fact you do take up residency there. Where are you on storming the field if you're a ranked team and you don't cover and you pull out a victory in overtime?
It's supposed to be fun. It looks fun when they do that. I've been in the middle of some field stormings before. It's wild. And here's my thing about it. If you understand that you are responsible for your own self when you come over that wall, and if you have a compound fracture because you didn't realize how far it was to come over that wall and get down to the field, that's on you. Don't sue the school. Don't sue the university. Like, you did that to yourself. So take responsibility for your own actions. Understand that there's an inherent danger in it, because that's what all these conferences are worried about. Is like the SEC has fines if you storm the field. They're worried because it's their business. Like, they don't want somebody to get killed when this happens. My thing is, the risks inherent. When you accept that, great, go. I just remember being at Ole Miss in 2014 when they beat Alabama, and watching all the demure, because they get dressed up for games. They like the students dress to the nines for games. So you're watching all these women in their
Don't
high
care
heels.
for that. Where are you? That you're steeped in that tradition. It's just the frat dudes who do it, right? Or is it everybody?
At Ole Miss, it's pretty much everybody. In most other SEC places, it's the Greek system that does it.
Okay.
But no, I'm from Florida. Like, we sweat in places that most people don't know if you have places. So I'm all for half naked at the I'm all for half naked at the game. But it was really funny watching these Ole Miss people, because they are completely like party dresses, high heels, pearls, and they are diving off this 6-foot wall onto the field. It's like they think, because you watch it and you watch the gears turn in their mind for about half a second. They're like, this could be real bad. All right, whatever. And it's fun. Like the Colorado thing. Yeah. Should you storm the field after beating Colorado State when you were a 3-touchdown favorite? No, but that was very exciting and it was fun. And these people haven't gotten to enjoy much football for 20 years.
Enjoy Mount Pius. I mean, you're not allowed to storm the field when you're in college. I do appreciate, though, that it's not a lawless situation. There are some do's and don'ts for doing it. Yeah, you could break an ankle. I submit, having been a field storming vet myself, when the Hoosiers would start to, I mean, it's a cause. If you're a certain level of school, a victory is a reason to storm the field. Doesn't matter.
Alabama will never storm the field. They're too good for that. They feel like they're above that sort of thing. But Colorado, yeah, you're field stormers. I mean, Baylor, you're field stormers.
Here's what I would say. One, don't get caught up in the try. If it's your thing to try to bring the goalpost down, have a great time. Just understand that there's a fair amount of toil involved in that. And if you actually participate in the successful collapse of those, then the carrying them through town and everything, that's more of a commitment than I'm willing to
I will take you back to that 2014 Alabama Ole Miss game. So that was a 2:30 Central Time start. Mm-hmm. That game ends about 6:00 Central Time. At about midnight Central Time, I'm wandering through the Grove on Ole Miss's campus. I find these young men carrying a piece of goalpost, just wandering aimlessly through campus, trying to figure. And I asked them, "What are you doing?" "We're trying to find a saw. We want to cut this thing up so each of us can take a piece of it home." And I'm like, "You're in the middle of a college campus. Are you going to take that to a Home Depot or to an Ace Hardware? Like, how are we going to do this?" Because I don't think most people keep saws in their dorm room. Yeah. But eventually, somebody with an apartment had a saw. It was delivered to them and they got it chopped up. But it was funny to watch these people in the middle of the night just wander around with this giant metal tube that was once a goalpost.
I get it. I admire the taking of the goalpost and keeping the memory. But again, you should be out on the town. Rejoicing. That's also, don't talk to the opposing players. That doesn't lead to anything good. As they're trying to get off the field, just leave them alone.
They also for your kick sake your ass. Well. Like, understand that even if they just got beat, and even if they are not playing on what is considered to be a good college football team, they can still beat your ass. Whoever
the LeGarrette Blount rule, right?
Yes. Well, that was, and Byron Hout was a Boise State player, but. Yeah, don't do it. Just let it go.
Put yourself in his shoe. But now, listen, you're a fun fella and deserve, all the heat you get as a media member because you're entertaining and you make it fun. But you just proved that you know your stuff. The guy who LeGarrette Blount punched out is pretty good. That's a deep dive in the trivia department.
Who can forget that game was crazy? If you want to take a deep dive into that game, that was Chip Kelly's first game as Oregon's head coach. The offense couldn't do anything, though they ended up winning the game. Chip Kelly refunded some Oregon fans tickets and travel costs to that game. That person wrote in complaining about how bad the offense was, and Chip Kelly refunded him.
You know what? That's a great point to jump in here. And we do have to talk about the game that may be even more important than college football, the game of life. You had some hot takes at the end of last weekend about hamburgers, the state of hamburger and potatoes that come on the side in our major burger
Yes.
chains. We'll get into that in just a second, but I do want to talk about Chip Kelly's conference. I want to talk about the Pac-12 conference, and I'm going to say it, and tell me if this is hyperbolic. This is the greatest year in Pac-12 history. In this conferences, in its big farewell, its big climax, its big farewell to college football. This is its best year. 1/3 just about of the top 25 is comprised of Pac-12 teams right now. Zeros all over the loss column, up and down the conference. How say you? What are we seeing here? What are we to make of this Pac-12 right now?
It's definitely the deepest year. I don't know that they have somebody like USC under Pete Carroll where they are that dominant and that much better than everybody else in the rest of the country. But absolutely, in terms of depth, this is the best year they've had. And you think about USC, Utah, Oregon, we expect them to be good. Washington looks incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they go to Michigan State and just slice and dice them. Michael Penix Jr. throws the prettiest ball in the country. I don't know if it's something about the lefty spin, but it's beautiful. Oregon State is really good. UCLA plays Utah this week. We're going to find out how good the Bruins are. But they got, Carson Steele. He was the best running back in the MAC last year, and now he's got a pet alligator. And I mean, it's everything you want going on in the Pac-12 right now. And it is sad because it won't exist next year. They will be, these guys will get spread out. You'll have the ones going to the Big 10. You'll have the ones going to the Big 12. And then whatever happens with Washington State and Oregon State. But it is just wild to see how deep they are. And a lot of it is quarterback play. I mean,
I agree. But, it's sort of like you've seen a lot of movies in which this is kind of the plot. The Natural and Major League, and there are other ones where it's like the whole thing goes down unless you win it all. It feels like the Pac-12 feels like
this movie is Lethal Weapon. This is Danny Glover going, it's my last day before retirement. I'm too old for this shit. Like, that's what this is. It is every last day before retirement buddy cop movie that ever existed. And of course, they come out on top at the end. So that means Oregon or USC is going to win.
Well, I think that's the mirage. And I really do feel like this has been a gentle roll, relatively speaking, Dion and Colorado notwithstanding. It's been, and as you started to touch on there, the QB play has been high end. I mean, the Heisman race is marvelous stuff because of the way some of the top QBs have been playing so far. But the mirage that is the top 25 right now, I mentioned all these teams with the unblemished records. That's all about to change as we really kick into high gear with conference play in the Pac-12 alone. Beavs and Cougs and Pullman, one of them is leaving with a loss. Chips Bruins in Salt Lake to play Whittingham's Utes. One of those two teams obviously is going to get the strike in the loss column. And Colorado and Oregon, the Ducks laying 20.5 total on that one, 72.5. No Travis Hunter. Does this mean that the Ducks should take care of business on Saturday?
They should, but I've underestimated Colorado a couple times already, and I don't know that I can do that again. This is one I thought going into the season, before we got to see Colorado play, that Oregon would just wipe the field with them.
Sure.
No Travis Hunter makes this somewhat difficult because Oregon's got a few receivers that you would say, okay, that's who you're putting Travis Hunter on. And if you don't have a Travis Hunter to put on them, it becomes a problem. And this is where, maybe that Colorado's D-line gets exposed a little bit because Oregon offensively, they are good up front. Josh Connerly's he was a 5-star recruit who's kind of coming into his own as a sophomore now at offensive tackle. Defensive line, they got a bunch of dudes, and Colorado hasn't seen anything like this yet. And this is where you worried about Colorado going into the season, because I did think they'd be okay at the skill positions. I've been impressed so far that their offensive and defensive lines have held up. The question now is when they're playing elite talent on the line of scrimmage, do they still hold up? And that's where I wonder.
Man, those lasers Shedeur Sanders is throwing consistently out there are stunning. But I think you and I park our cars in the same garage on this. I say the mirage of the top 25 is as constituted, all these teams. Obviously, Oregon State is probably not going to stick around being in the teens right now if they take the L this weekend. But if there were no preseason polls and they struggled to get past Colorado State and all that, I think you and I agree that that's how the polls should work, that Colorado right now would be number one. And if they're not number one, then Texas
No.
should be number one, and
Texas or
Alabama
LSU
should be.
Texas or Florida State would be number one.
Okay, that's fine. But
in fact, I have a segment on my show called Resume Rankings where we do a ranking based only on what the teams have done. And so it is, I got to tell you, doing it last night was ugly. It was bad because the teams have been so inconsistent. Like I had Texas number one last week. I kept Texas at number one, but I didn't want to because it was 10-10 against Wyoming and going to the fourth quarter. I kept Florida State at number two. I didn't want to because they almost lost to Boston College, but they figured it out. And so, I got the top 10 right now. No SEC teams in it because, well, think about it. Georgia hadn't played anybody till South Carolina, and they farted around for a full half against South Carolina. Like, I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure they'll be in there. I imagine I'm still picking Georgia to win the national title, but I'm doing a ranking based on what you've done so far. And if you haven't played anybody yet, it's hard to put you anywhere. Like, I don't have Ohio State in there yet. If Ohio State goes into South Bend and beats Notre Dame, they'll be number one next week.
That's right. And this is, you could also call it the poll of justice if you wanted to, because that's what you're doing. And, the people who push back, like, well, the poll doesn't matter anymore. And that assumes that the people sitting in the committee deciding who goes to the Final Four are robots or something other than human, impervious to,
but see, I disagree with you. I don't think they're influenced by the polls that happen before they get together. I don't think so at all.
If you hear a story endlessly, it's why brainwashing.
Then why did TCU make the national title game last year?
Because if you get a preponderance of evidence that becomes impossible to resist,
and that's what you always get. So I'll tell you, Shek, I did this. I was an AP poll voter for 5 years. And for most of those, I ranked teams like this. I would have my preseason guesses, and then once the season started, I would start ranking based only on what happened. I always ended up at the same place as everybody else.
Really?
Yeah. It always ends up in the same place.
I just feel as though that if you endlessly have a conversation around, well, we know Bama is better than what we're seeing so far, that is going to lead you into a place to give them a little more grace than you might another.
Well, you're going to give them grace for a little while, but if they keep if they go lose to Ole Miss this week, they're not getting grace.
Well, I mean, obviously, then they'll have played themselves out of being relevant.
If they start winning again, then they deserve the grace. So,
but the SEC specifically in 2023 is not the best conference. We agree about that, right? This year,
it's not. Yeah.
And the Pac-12 probably, as it stands right now, shapes up a little bit better. And the thing that the pull the Band-Aid off,
looking really good right now too.
Yes, indeed. And I feel like the idea that listen, obviously I acknowledge that the SEC is the king of college football. I'm not insane, but I do think that there's a momentum that comes along with that the SEC rules, and it just means more and everything else that predisposes those committee members to.
You mean the fact that they keep winning playoff games and keep putting the most players in the draft every year? That
I'm not arguing about. I'm talking about right now. That's the point, right? Know, that's what preseason polls do. They
here's the thing, though,
you to lean on last year.
They're going to put the most players in the draft next year too. So they still have better players. Now, how that gap looks is going to be pretty intriguing, but the SEC is not that great right now. That does not mean that these teams won't evolve. And I suspect Georgia will look better by the end of the season than they look right now. Alabama, we'll see. That quarterback situation is kind of hinky.
How many SEC teams? Which conference gets more than one team into the Final Four, if any?
The Big Ten would be the one I would guess if I had to pick one right now. And that would be if Penn State turns out to be really good. And then it's one of Penn State, Michigan, or two of Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, depending on how all that shakes out.
Okay. Do you think that Nick Saban ever wins another national title at Bama?
That's a tough one. He's still recruiting at a very high level. If you look at the recruiting class they signed this year, it's ranked higher than anyone he's ever signed before. And he always signs a top 3 recruiting class. So it's weird watching this because you wonder, did he make a bad hire with Tommy Rees as OC? Is that the problem? Is it just that they don't have the right quarterback right now? Because it feels like they are not nearly as dominant as they have been. And I go back to the Texas game. Initially, my thought was, okay, Texas is developing its players better. Texas has real dudes on both lines of scrimmage. That's why this happened. But then you watch that USF game and it's like, okay, Alabama's not blocking very well at all. And USF should not be able to do this. They should not be able to get this kind of pressure on Alabama's quarterbacks. So it does feel like there's been a step down, but I still think if you keep stockpiling talent like that, you have a chance to win national titles. And he seems to be pretty clear that he's not going anywhere for a while. So if they hit on the right quarterback, say once in the next 3-4 years, they can win it again.
Okay. All right. That was a generous answer from you. It does have the Vader v Kenobi vibe to it though, right? Like when first we met, Kirby Smart, I was but the student. Now I am the master. Not just that, but obviously Brian Kelly taking some players away from him, presumably at LSU, luring some people. So
Texas doing it.
Right.
Obviously, Kirby started the trend, but Texas is doing it now. LSU could always compete with him for a little bit. Billy Napier at Florida's picking off a few, but even like Missouri comes in, and with NIL, they're able to keep some of their really good players home so far.
Do you think David Letterman would blow in a call or should blow in a call to Nick Saban and say, see, this is why I went with Tom Snyder instead of Jon Stewart at 12:30 a.m. to follow me? Because when you create a powerhouse behind you, now, like the Saban regret, all these high-end, these reclamation projects, this guy is a really savvy offensive play designer. I mean, this has been the reclamation hub.
Right, and that's not what this is. Tommy Rees was hired from Notre Dame.
Right. Well, that was a different one. But I mean, the guys who he's rolled through there have now gone on and created powerhouses across the land, thereby diminishing the tide, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. And now I want to do my Tom Snyder. Is that it? It's been a while since I've seen Tom Snyder. That was a long time ago.
Well, it's been a while since any human being has seen Tom Snyder.
Jon Stewart would have been at 12:30 would have been a nightmare. It would have been what Dave was for Johnny. Essentially, like, are we sure about this? So yeah, no, I agree. But now I think that's part of it too with Alabama is they have not been able to go to the bench. The bench is not as deep. There's no Steve Sarkisian sitting on the bench. There's no Mike Locksley sitting on the bench. There's no Lane Kiffin sitting on the bench. There wasn't anybody immediately who came to mind when Bill O'Brien left. Now, I thought a part of it, I think, though, was the timing of O'Brien's exit as well. So they, in deference to Bill Belichick, everybody knew Bill O'Brien was going to the Patriots, but they waited till that season was over. They pretended that Matt Patricia was going to be back, and it was not the typical time that you're doing that hiring. Typically, you're doing that hiring in December, which would have allowed them to be more active in the quarterback transfer market, maybe go after Sam Hartman or somebody like that. Instead, it was Tommy Rees going after Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, and then Tommy Rees leaves Notre Dame. But Brian Grubb, the Washington offensive coordinator, is another guy they interviewed for that job. He ends up staying at Washington. He's doing fantastic right now.
Where's he next year? He's going to be the big ticket, right? He'll
be one of them. There's a few. Sean Lewis, the offensive coordinator at Colorado, is another one who will be. And Sean was the head coach at Kent State. Kent State's a really hard place to win, but people who understand what's going on understood that Sean was a really good coach. It's just that when you have a schedule that makes you go to Georgia, to Washington, and to Oklahoma, you're going to be beat up by the time you get to MAC play, and you're just not going to look that great. But everybody in the business knew that Sean could coach. What he's doing with Colorado's offense this year is showing that again. So he's going to be one of those. Mike Elko at Duke, I think, is the guy that everybody's going to want, because he has worked 9 wins his first season at Duke, and then comes out and kicks the crap out of Clemson game 1. It almost doesn't matter what they do from here on, but they're so solid. Like, you can see them winning 8-9 games again, even against a tougher schedule this year.
I don't see Neil Brown's Mountaineers winning 8 or 9 games this year. Nevertheless, they held
no, but
Pitt
he's still
Panthers.
employed today because he won that backyard brawl. Listen, Neil Brown knows what he's in for. He knows he's got to win 8-9 games this year to stay, and that's probably not going to happen. But he's going to give it his damnedest, and that's why he's calling plays again. And they needed that backyard brawl win badly. The fan base would have just said, well, the fan base is already out on him, but that would have given them license to say, look, this ain't going to happen. Sooner rather than later, let's get this done. Now he's still got a chance going into Big 12 play.
Hey, you know what? I got to tell you, I'm on Pat Narduzzi's side of this. Shame on the grown-ups who boo Phil Jurkovec. I really feel bad for this kid. If you don't know his story, he's a Pittsburgh native. He goes off to Notre Dame, then goes to Boston College, has a lot of injuries, some mixed success, returns to play prodigal son for the Pitt Panthers to continue the little run of success by Pitt standard in the 21st century. And he's been an absolute atrocity. I really feel bad for him. And also, I'm just sick in my balls about what I'm seeing. I mean, this is just 6 points in Morgantown. Gross. Fat. Shame the devil. Just horrible stuff.
It's interesting because Pat Narduzzi is such a defensive guy. And it made him so nervous having a high-flying offense with Mark Whipple and Kenny Pickett when they won the ACC, when Jordan Addison was the Blitnikoff Award winner. And it was the strangest thing. Whipple goes to Nebraska, and Narduzzi says on a radio show, well, now we can probably run the ball. And I'm like, you're making fun of the guy who just helped you win the ACC? Like, you do understand the desired result is winning games. Regardless of how you win them, you're supposed to win them. And so, like, I get you want to play a different style, but maybe that style doesn't work that well. And this style got you an ACC title.
Well, the problem, yeah. I mean, the kid though trying to sling the ball downfield is downright painful, Jens. I mean, it's really like missing throws by 15 yards, and that's not an exaggeration. All right, let's move on from that irrelevant situation. Very quickly, a couple of things for you. You mentioned a couple of times because it's the game of the week right now, probably the game of the season in terms of what it means for what we'll see around the holidays. Ohio State, Notre Dame. How say you in this one? Going down at South Bend.
I am fascinated by this game because it feels like Sam Hartman is the missing piece at Notre Dame. It's what they've needed.
It really does.
Is a dynamic quarterback, because they've had great offensive lines. They've had good backs. They haven't had the best receivers in the world. They've had very good tight ends, but it felt like that unlocked everything. And the question is, have they played any defenses yet that really could challenge them? I thought NC State's would be able to, but NC State, I don't know that they've looked that good so far. So I can't really judge much off of that game. And then Ohio State, the big question for them is, can they stop giving up big plays defensively? Because that's really the only thing holding them back from winning a national title. And so we're going to get a really good answer to that question, because Notre Dame's offense has been explosive and efficient so far this season. If Ohio State is not better, Notre Dame will be able to take advantage of that. If Ohio State has gotten that tightened up, then they're going to be able to keep Notre Dame in check, make Notre Dame look a little more boring, and then they'll be able to win because nobody can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. That's the thing. Ohio State still has the most special player on the field, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. And I don't know that Notre Dame has anything that competes with that. So that's where Ohio State can win. Now, if they're the same defense they've been the last 2 years, and Notre Dame is running the ball, and all of a sudden play fake, boom, over the top twice, Notre Dame can win this game.
Are they wearing the green spaghetti? Any insight on that?
They are wearing the new green uniforms.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Advantage Irish. How much is that paid off though? It felt like it worked out, probably about 2/3 of the time in my youth. I can't recall the green really resulting in victories that would have been losses.
Yeah, I don't think it's been any sort of specific, like there's no big game you can point to that says this worked, but it also hasn't been a complete disaster. Let us not forget the Georgia blackout game of 2008 when Alabama came to Athens and Georgia wore black, and Alabama's strength coach at the time, who now works for Georgia, by the way, it's Tuesday practice and he's helping the Tide players get stretched out, and he goes, you know why they're wearing black? Because they're going to a funeral. And that's exactly what it was. It was a nightmare for Georgia. So I think they've worn those jerseys a few more times, but they wear them in games they're sure they're going to win.
Of course, this should give you the spiritual advantage if you're in the visiting locker room and the other team has to concoct special uniforms to beat you. That's what I've always said about the Dallas Cowboys. They're wearing their white jerseys at home just to try to put a pox on us. Advantage us. We're in their heads before we even take the field. Okay, so what's your pick on that one? Notre Dame, Ohio State. And by the way, as I mentioned some of those other games, this feels like maybe the biggest elimination Saturday we're going to have on the slate this year. There are a lot of teams that fancy themselves as kind of in the mix, and the dream ends here with a loss. Right? Ohio State
I don't think
beats
Notre Dame.
They can't go to the. Really? You don't think if Notre Dame loses, that's it for them? They can't go.
No, because they still play USC.
Okay.
And if they thump USC, even if they have a loss in this, as long as it's not a complete blowout, they still got a chance. This is one of the few years where and we'll never see it again because Notre Dame will always make the playoff if they win 10 games from now on. But in this last year of the 14 playoff, this is one of the few chances Notre Dame has where they don't have to go 12-0. There's a window at 11-1, and that's if you've got a win against Ohio State and a close loss to USC or vice versa. So that's I still think Ohio State. I'm leaning toward. I haven't. We'll have to get the picks officialized Wednesday of this week, and we know how those go. But I still think I lean toward Ohio State just because, again, the most special player on the field plays for them.
And it's one of those matchups that you've seen for several years coming here. I'm sure everybody from Columbus, obviously short drive, relatively speaking, over to South Bend. I'm sure that place is going to be populated with plenty of red to go along with it. Should be a great vibe there. Does this mean, does the 12-team playoff equal that teams won't be worried about scheduling better non-conference foes? That's the math, right?
That's my hope. That's my hope. And I do think from talking to athletic directors, that's what they want too, because they've seen precipitous drop-offs in attendance based on the quality of the games. And it didn't used to be that way. People would just come because they were playing a game. But now they don't want to, if you live in the college town that's 2 hours from the major city, people don't want to go get a hotel or gas up the RV for that trip unless it's a game they want to go to. And I think now there's license to schedule those games, and there's a competitive reason to do it because
that's what my feeling is, right?
The Tom Izzo effect. Like you're ready for March because you played tough games in December, and this way, even if your conference schedule a little bit down, you can load up in September, and so your team will have seen the type of guys it will see in the playoff, and you won't feel bad if you lost one of those because you're still going to make it.
The shame is, and everybody talks about who cares about everybody loves the regional rivalries, but then everybody becomes an accountant about it. Like, well, it's about math. It's about more dollars and, network and all that. But it does practically impact recruiting. I've got to think that's why you need, where I come from, Pitt and Penn State, and, Penn State doesn't need Pitt. Well, Pitt doesn't need Penn State either, except the regional rivalry boosts both teams, both programs, and impacts recruit. Right, of course. Let's not completely lose our soul with this, right? That's how you make good on the traditions of college football in the super conference era, is in non-conference. You take advantage of those opportunities. and Pitt and West Virginia and Notre Dame and Penn State should try to play each other perennially. That's that to give that back to
I think
not going to kill you like it would.
The ACC and SEC teams get this better than anybody else. And that's when all this realignment was going on and everybody's like, well, I guess these teams will never play again. I'm like, you realize that Georgia Tech used to be in the SEC and they still play Georgia every year. South Carolina used to be in the ACC. They still play Clemson every year. Florida State and Florida have never been in the same conference and they play every year. Like, grown-ups can figure it out. It's not that hard.
Right. Except that you've given them an excuse to rationalize their way out of it. And Penn State can say like, wow, we don't need to play Pitt. Of course, we don't need to play football.
You don't need to play Akron. It would be nice if you played Pitt.
Yeah, of course. Right. And I think by expanding it, it's like, all right, if we lose that's why. It's not that they're afraid. People get into that, and that's loaded words. Well, we're not afraid to play you. We killed you the last time we played you. Not afraid. You're worried of the outcome, that if you take a strike in the L column in a non-conference game, it doesn't then the whole Big Ten season can be rendered.
Now, let us not forget that it was a loss to Pitt that kept the 2016 Penn State team out of the playoffs.
And much like they did to the West Virginia Mountaineers, 13-9. Okay, now let's talk about the last thing I want to kibitz with you about is burgers. You travel the land, and I don't want to get cute. Here's the thing that happens with burger debates is that people like, there's a joint though that you don't know about that's a little hole, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking
about macro fast food.
Right. Now within that, there's some regional favorites. You know, you and I got hit up. We were I responded to something you said on social media, and a guy named Corey jumped in to say that what about Steak and Shake, Coach Knight's favorite.
Yep.
When he was heading out for burgers after ball games. That's a dandy place. Now, what's your thought?
Also terrible fries, which is what we're going to get to.
No. Don't say that about Steak and Shake. They have good.
I will say that about Steak and Shake. Dave, I spent a lot of time at Steak and Shake in my youth. Steak and Shake is in Florida as well. Yeah, we had a Steak and Shake 2 miles from my high school.
And what's your
we
grievance?
Had 2 Steak and Shakes in Gainesville in college.
What's your beef? What's the problem with it?
They're terrible. They're just little tiny things. They need to be bigger, thicker.
Got to eat them. Listen, got to eat them when they come out. Don't let them sit there for 20 minutes.
Even when they come out, they could just be better. And we're getting to what I said about In-N-Out Burger, because so our friend Ross Tucker, who he calls football games and played in the NFL.
He knows his way around a plate of food. He likes that. He has some good opinions.
He sends a photo from In-N-Out Burger and says, "What am I getting?" And so I quote tweeted that and I said, "An Uber to a place with passable fries." And here's my thing on In-N-Out.
Mean-spirited, but okay.
Yeah. Burgers are fantastic at In-N-Out. They're great. It's maybe the best fast food. And remember, fast food burger is different than, say, like a Five Guys. Five Guys, you're taking out a mortgage to get a burger and fries. Different. Well, that's category.
But see, that's where it suffers. Let me interrupt you. I have to say this. Yep. You're not, when you people, In-N-Out is so good, it's a victim of its own success, because people don't compare In-N-Out, which it deserves to be compared to McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. But instead, because it's so good, improbably, you understand, it's the big underdog. It costs what it cost in 1978, or maybe not exactly, but it's a very affordable burger versus Five
Guys, Steak and Shake, all
Shake Shack.
Yeah, all very different price categories.
But it's competitive, improbably. Yeah. It's very much like Chip
my problem is not with the burger.
But it's like Chip, but I just want to say it's much. Boise State isn't as deep as the powerhouse teams in the Power 5 conferences. Yeah. Of course, they're trying to cobble something together to be relevant. Okay, so but every item isn't great.
Here's the thing: their fries are aggressively terrible. It's like they're mocking us with their fries, because you could have the best fast food restaurant in America by serving average fries. It's sort of like Iowa. It's sort of like the Iowa football team. You have the best defense and the best special teams, but you have an aggressively awful offense. All you need is an average offense, and suddenly you are an elite program.
It's like the Jets, if they could just get a quarterback. Okay, I get what you're saying. So So you're suggesting that this is some sort of conspiracy? Maybe it highlights the greatness of the burger. I've floated this idea about a number. Your wheelhouse, as much as anybody in this land, is barbecue and the
Yeah.
different regional flavors you can have in that regard. I find that for me, when I'm making a decision, like I sort of like lyrics in music. I'm more of what the music sounds like, and lyrics come second. Side dishes with food, though, matter greatly if you're trying to weigh which one is, but which
But
place is better.
it's funny because when it's barbecue, they don't like there. It's nice if you have good side dishes, but I only care if you have good meat.
Not for me. I like fries because I think fries really make the barbecue experience sing when you can go away from the meat for a second and go with a potato and dip it into the same sauce. That really completes the experience for me. And when the only thing you're giving me is baked beans, collard greens, fine with me. Baked beans, fine with me, but I like a nice fry with my barbecue. And I know that that is maybe not traditional, but it's what I want. But okay, let's not get distracted with that. You've touched on something interesting here, and I can't say I disagree. What is going on with In-N-Out's fries?
Well,
It's not that they're not good. It's that you make a compelling case here that they're trying to make lousy fries.
Right. Because McDonald's fries are better, Wendy's fries are better, Burger King's fries are better, Chick-fil-A's fries are much better. Like, all you have to do is do something like one of them. Shape it like one of them, cook it like one of them. And I realize that In-N-Out, they feel like their ingredients are more pure than all of these places. But you can still make a decent fry.
This is weird because you know what? I think Chicago, one of the great food cities on the planet Earth, doesn't make a good, or doesn't have very many, given the size of its population, very many good traditional pizza places. Now, I get it. Like,
you're not talking about the deep dish. You're talking about.
I'm not talking about Chicago pie. I'm talking about regular old pizza pie. You know what we would have said. Same thing. New Orleans doesn't have good
salads.
What is it?
Terrible salads in New Orleans.
Yeah. Well, they see, that's the best example. Yes, New Orleans. People always make the joke like, oh, if I lived here for a few months, I'd gain 80 pounds. That is in fact true in New Orleans for me, because they don't pretend. They're not doing the thing of like, yeah, we also have a nice little salad with some grilled chicken. They don't try, because they thumb their nose at you and they say, we're not gonna do that jive for you. I think that's what In-N-Out is trying to tell us. Only eat the burgers, but the fries are ancillary. They have nothing to do with this competition.
And maybe that's what I'll do. The next time I go to an In-N-Out, I will just get like 3 burgers. But I love, it's weird because I am anti-side, well, not anti-side when it comes to barbecue, but if you just gave me all meat on a tray, I will take that over a balanced one. But when I go out for burgers, I want fries. In fact, sometimes I'll get 2 orders of fries. And so that's the part that it hurts my heart, because the burger is really good. And it's like, all you got to do is have a just basically imitation McDonald's fry, something close to that in surface area to volume ratio, and you're good. And they just don't want to do it. It's
2017 Jaguars equal In-N-Out, right? Like, if only it weren't Blake Bortles, if only you could have had league average, right?
I'll give an example. I did this story a few years ago on how college coaches treat NFL scouts. And all the NFL scouts said, Nick Saban, Alabama, best place in the world to go scout, because it could be 4 a.m. They will open up the facility for you. They'll put on all the film you want. They'll make you coffee. They'll bring you food. Meanwhile, you go to some of these other places and they make you stand in like a baseball dugout, like 200 yards from the field, and you can't see anything because they're worried you're going to steal their plays and call your alma mater about it. And I'm like, this is the simplest thing in the world, because if you treat scouts right and they like your players, your players get drafted higher, and that's good for recruiting. It's the greatest, kind of makes its own gravy of all time. And it's like, you see what Nick Saban does. You see how much better he is at this than you. Just do what he does. Like, if you're In-N-Out, like, send a mole to Chick-fil-A and find out, how do you source your fries? How do you cook your fries? What do you do? Like, just copy them.
Now you lose me. The Chick-fil-A phenomenon.
That waffle fry is amazing.
It's good. let's not get crazy with it. I'm also right out of the gate. I didn't like your opinions, your opening remarks about Steak and Shake. I think we're just different people at the end of the day.
Do you
I
like
just think
crinkle fries? Are you a crinkle cut fry person?
they're fine.
Okay, good.
But I do
don't
like a shoestring.
see. I don't like a shoestring. I like a
Clearly.
thick steak fry, ideally. Like that is
steak fry is hard. I mean, you really need a master working the fryer to get that right. There's
you
too
also
much
actually need a
variation.
steak with the juice that you can dip it in.
I'd rather eat a burnt fry than an undercooked fry. And
Correct.
steak fries give you, you're always going to get almost always at least 1 to 6 ones that are a little stiff. And then the entire experience is not as good as it might have been. The one that I always go to is where fries. The fascinating thing to me is Arby's with the curly fry.
Yep.
They're the only people who have figured out that you're not required to put the spice on the fry. Like who decided 25 years ago that if you're going to put some spice on a fry, it's got to be a circle fry. And if it's a circle fry, then it requires that it takes the spice.Ve everybody abides by that weird law.
Now,
I don't
will
think
say,
it's written down anywhere.
I think the best fast food fry, the best, drive-through type restaurant, lowest price point, Checkers / Rallies, depending on what part of the country. And one's called Checkers, one's called Rallies, but the same place. Those fries are amazing. Now they are seasoned, though, and it's a different experience. It is, but they are the long vertical fry, but they're a little bit thicker and they're seasoned. And it is delightful. Like if you could get an In-N-Out burger with Checkers fries, it is fast food nirvana.
It's interesting that I also like the I don't know the backstory that probably you do as a historian of these things is like Carl's Jr. / Hardee's. They also have very strong French fries. McDonald's is still the king. I think as things evolve and everything always our football conferences and everything else change and everything gets left in the rear view mirror, McDonald's remains king of the fast food fry. And I hail it for that. In my opinion, at least, it remains number one. Hardee's Carl's Jr. probably would get my number 2. I don't know why they don't just blend. Why don't they become Carl Hardy?
I've never figured that out either, because I grew up in the South, so it was Hardee's, and I'd never heard of a Carl's Jr. until I got a job that required me to go to the West Coast. But I find it interesting that they just brought the Hardee's biscuits to the Carl's Jr.'s a few years ago. Like in the South, you didn't go to Hardee's for burgers. Like you went to Hardee's in the morning and you got biscuits. Like Hardee's steak biscuits were my favorite thing to eat for breakfast as a kid. And they still make the best fast food biscuit of anybody.
I will say they are doing remarkable work collectively in the breakfast department. The only thing that's sad is, I don't know if it's a national thing, McDonald's right before COVID, breakfast all day.
Yeah.
Since COVID, back to the old thing. Can't get the egg McMuffin anymore.
I don't understand that. I don't understand why Hardee's / Carl's Jr. doesn't do breakfast all day, because there's a competitor in the South called Bojangles that started in Carolina.
Sure. I've had Bojangles many times in
and
Tennessee. East Tennessee staple. I eat it all the time when I'm there.
Absolutely. So they do breakfast all day. You can get that Cajun filet biscuit anytime, day or night. That's what you're good at. And we can talk about this in any walk of life, whether it's restaurants, football, acting. Like, do the thing you're good at and do it all the time.
But isn't that what In-N-Out thinks they're doing? They think they're I bet you they're looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, why fix what ain't broke? And Staples
but it is broken.
Saying,
you could be
broken,
the best,
is what they're saying. Right. I hear what you're saying. There's room to grow still. Like, listen, the Yankees is a great brand, but all those titles are in the rearview mirror. What are we going to do to get our next one? That's what In-N-Out needs to start asking itself.
The not doing what you're good at would be if In-N-Out said, we're only going to serve those burgers till 10:30 every morning, and then we're going to serve something completely different afterward. Like that's where Hardee's loses me. Like, serve those biscuits all day. It's so much better than what you make for lunch and dinner.
Man,
I'm also a big breakfast for lunch and breakfast for dinner person. I could eat breakfast for every meal.
That's what, you know what, at the Dameshek home, we that's what we do on Christmas Eve. It's our tradition is breakfast
Brilliant.
for dinner. Yeah, we do it. Listen, I love a nice breakfast for dinner.
We do it every few weeks in the Staples house because
really.
I've got a 14-year-old son who will eat roughly 20 pancakes if you put 20 pancakes in front of him. So it's a way to get him going because he can be a little picky sometimes, but you go, oh, we're having breakfast for dinner. And he's just going to pound a stack of pancakes.
But ultimately, yeah, that's a function of being able to generate volume, the pancake. But as a man of taste, the waffle is better than the pancake because it's got a syrup cup.
Depends on my mood. It's like I don't have a definitive answer to the pie cake debate, nor do I have a definitive answer to the waffle pancake debate because I some days I want the pancake and some days I want the waffle.
You know what? I love making lists. I love ranking things. I love debating things, but there are certain categories where I'm with you on that. I like to say, I'm glad both exist. I'm glad to live in a world where I have those two options available to me. You've said it all, Andy Staples. It's clear why you have been elected king of college football and are in the running now for Game of Life. You know what? I'd like to serve in the same office with you. I'll tell you that much because I like where your head's at. Make sure you're checking out all of Andy Staples' great work. On3 is where you track him down on YouTube, doing really entertaining and insightful work. You just heard some of it here. We appreciate the time. Continued success to the Gators, fella.
Well, I can't wait, and we're going to have you on my show. I may need to have you do some preliminary Fruit of the Year work. They're doing some amazing things with cantaloupe lately, and it's shot up my rankings recently.
Consider the appetite whet for that conversation. Looking forward to it.